Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley, and if you're new here, we like to talk about stuff like the paranormal, unsolved mysteries, and of course, true crime. Now, today's video, I want to talk about something that I've been seeing a lot about on YouTube, and of course, I've also done a few videos on this phenomenon. And if you are not familiar, then this is called Missing 411. And basically, it has to do with the study of the national forests across North America, specifically in the US, where a lot of people are currently going missing. There's a lot of strange activity going on, and I'm talking about stuff like Bigfoot, skinwalkers, UFOs, strange sounds that people can't quite pinpoint. But specifically for today's video, we're actually going to focus on Mount Shasta, which is one of the biggest mountains slash volcanoes in the US. And in this particular area, there have been quite a lot of strange encounters, a lot of stories and disappearances as well. So before we go into the video, just want to send you guys a quick reminder to comment, like, subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. So like I was saying earlier, Missing 411 is a phenomenon where a lot of people go missing, especially when they are around a forest or in a forest, more so in national parks or heavy forested areas. And something that they all have in common is that most of the time, these people, unfortunately, are never found. But if they are found, they usually are found in places that were previously searched quite heavily, or they're found in very open areas that would be almost impossible for them not to be seen by somebody, or they're found in very far areas that would make impossible, like it would just make no sense for them to be found in that specific area. Now, when it comes to Mount Shasta, it does have a very long history, and we're going to start there. We're going to take it back and get a little bit of background on the area. So like I said, if you didn't already know, Mount Shasta is actually a volcano located in the Siskiyou County in Northern California. And the region has a lot of history with Native American tribes, and the oldest known human settlement in the area dates back to almost 7,000 years ago. And when it comes to the volcano, the last eruption was said to have been in 1250 AD. Now, during the early periods of the Euro-American contact, when Europeans first made contact with the Americas, Mount Shasta became quite a prominent landmark for them. It was used by both the Native Americans and the European settlers to navigate amongst the region. And when we get to today, Mount Shasta is a very popular hiking area. It's very tourist heavy. There's thousands of paths in the region, and there's plenty of hotels and resorts as well. People love coming here, especially if you're into nature and the outdoors. It's definitely a beautiful place to visit. Now, the legends of Mount Shasta range quite a bit. There's no concrete answer on what is actually going on here, but there are quite a lot of stories from, the probable and potentially practical to the quite comical. So let's start with one of the legends that is taken quite seriously by the Native Americans. So as we all know, Native Americans have a very rich culture, especially when it comes to mythology and their tales that they pass on throughout generations. Now, in Native American mythology, specifically to the Klamath people, Mount Shasta is supposedly home to a spirit chief named Skell. Now, he was said to have descended from the heavens onto the peak of Mount Shasta. And as a guardian, his only duty was to protect Mount Shasta, especially from the ruler of the underworld known as Lao, who was said at the time to have lived at the peak of Mount Mazama, which is actually located in Oregon. Now, legend goes that in doing so, Skell and Lao would fight, and they would do so by throwing rocks and lava at each other, which would count for the eruptions that were recorded at both Mount Shasta and Mount Mazama, which actually ended up collapsing into itself and now is kind of like a crater lake. Also stemming from Native American mythology is the story of Bigfoot. Now, Bigfoot is one of the more popular theories. It's a very well-known theory, and people all over the world have different names for it. You know, in Canada, we call it Sasquatch, also Bigfoot. Specifically, the people of Modoc refer to Bigfoot as a protector of the woods. Now, this particular theory or legend has actually grown to be quite a prominent one when it comes to Mount Shasta, solely based on the amount of sightings that people have seen in the area. Another legend actually strays away from Native Americans and actually takes us to a story of advanced civilization. Some people actually believe that Mount Shasta is home to an underground advanced city known as Telos, which is said to be inhabited by surviving members of Lemuria. So what is Lemuria? Well, Lemuria was actually said to have been a lost continent that actually ended up sinking. Now, a lot of people also believe that this continent could have potentially been Atlantis. So from there, they actually make the connections that Lemurians could actually be ancestors of the Atlanteans. So is it actually possible that there's an underground city in Mount Shasta that is inhabited by descendants of Atlantis? Personally, to me, this one seems like the most outlandish theory, but there's people that take this quite seriously. It could lead into another theory known as Hollow Earth, also known as Agartha, which I can make a completely different video about. But if you're curious and think that this could potentially be true, I suggest you guys look up Agartha and Hollow Earth. So moving on, thanks to thousands and thousands of sightings, people believe that Mount Shasta has something to do with aliens. And there was one predominant sighting back from 2019. Unfortunately, this one ended up being debunked, but it made a lot of noise, and there's plenty of other people that have recorded sightings of alien encounters or even just strange lights hovering above Mount Shasta. Now, a lot of people seem to think that the peak of Mount Shasta is some sort of refueling point, whereas others think that it could potentially just be like a guiding tool used by UFOs. There's even a belief that Mount Shasta could potentially be a portal to other dimensions. And an even crazier theory that I came across is that Mount Shasta could potentially be home to feral people, thanks to a TikTok video that went viral a couple years ago. But the real question here is, what is actually causing all of these strange disappearances? Is it a combination of these theories? Is it one or the other? Or is it something that we just have absolutely no idea about? That being said, I kind of want to go into a few of the strange stories coming out of Mount Shasta. And this next one is actually one of the more popular stories, and I know a lot of people have heard of this story, or at least some sort of derivative of this story. So it's the tale of Little John Doe. Now, this story was actually told by his grandmother in 2012, but the actual encounter was said to have happened in 2011. Now, after hearing the story from her grandson, the grandmother was so disturbed and perplexed about the story that she decided to post on a forum to see what other people thought of the story. So in October of 2011, this little boy was out camping with his parents in the Mount Shasta region, and he suddenly disappeared around 6:30 p.m. and he was only 3 years old. So of course his parents, completely frantic about where their son could have been, considering how small and how young he is, they started searching for him. They notified the authorities. Everyone was basically searching high and low for this little boy. There was absolutely zero sign of him until 5 hours later, when he was found just kind of lying in a thicket by himself. Thankfully, he was okay. He just had some minor scrapes and bruises, but he was fine, except for the fact that he was very quiet. He didn't say much the ride home, and he still didn't really explain what happened to him until he saw his grandmother, Kathy. And that was when he told her a very, very strange story. He went on to tell her that while he was out in the woods, he actually saw his grandmother Kathy in the woods, and that he said that she was talking to him in a very friendly manner, being very kind, speaking to him, how you would talk to a child in a playful voice, but that she expressed a lot of interest in his tummy. So later on, the grandma that he saw in the forest takes him to this cave where the little boy also described as a dungeon later on. But in this cave slash dungeon, he said he actually saw quite a lot of dusty purses, a lot of dusty guns, and a lot of spiders as well. So as he's talking to his grandmother, she's still expressing a lot of interest in his stomach, but this time she hands him a piece of paper and asks him to defecate on the piece of paper. Finding this request very odd, the boy, it's his grandmother, so he didn't decline doing it, but he said that he couldn't do it because he wasn't ready to do it. His grandmother was kind of fussy about it, but she let it go and they moved on to the next topic. So as they're still in the cave, his grandmother turns to him and starts telling him stories about UFOs and outer space. And she starts explaining to him that he himself was actually from outer space and that he had actually been implanted in his mother's belly. As she's telling him this story, she turns it aside, and that's when the light hits her in a specific way where the little boy couldn't help but notice that she had a very robotic look to her face. As he looks around the rest of the cave, that's when he actually ends up noticing that there's other robot-like humans in the cave, completely frozen, not moving. So sensing that something was off in the situation, and I'm sure anyone would at this point, he said that he found that this was weird and that he much preferred his real grandma, Kathy. Soon after this, he said that his grandmother told him that they had to go. They exited the cave and she took him to a river where she told him to lie down and to wait there until someone came to find him. And 5 hours later, that's where he was found. Now, initially, his actual grandma, Kathy, thought that this story was just something of his imagination. Maybe he just had a very stressful experience and he was creating some sort of fantasy in his mind to make up for the traumatic experience when he was lost. But then she remembered a strange encounter that she had herself when she was out camping at Mount Shasta. She recalled one time when she was out camping that she had awoken early in the morning one day. To her surprise, she was actually face down in the dirt outside of her sleeping bag and away from her tent. And this was completely out of character for her because she said that she was a very clean, organized person and that she would never choose to sleep in the dirt that way. And then she remembered feeling this intense pain at the back of her neck, where she later found a small puncture wound. After that, she actually ended up becoming quite ill for a few days before fully recovering. But the strange experience that she had with the strange experience that her grandson was telling her made her think twice about what actually happened to the both of them out in Mount Shasta. Now, this next story is actually about the man with no face. And when I came across this story, it actually gave me quite a lot of chills. And I noticed that it wasn't just a one-time thing. There were actually quite a lot of people who had experienced something similar. Now, this story comes from a man named Josh who was actually out hiking in Mount Shasta with his father. It was a quiet day. There were not a lot of people out in the paths. So as they're making their way through the hike up the mountain, they came across another father and son duo. So both pairs stopped to talk, just small talk. They greeted each other, chatted about the weather that day. And when it came time for them to go their separate ways, the other father and son duo started going down the hill, whereas Josh and his father kept going upwards. All of a sudden, as they're going up, Josh had this sudden urge to look back and turn around to see where the other father and son were. And to his complete surprise, the pair were significantly further down the mountain. much further than he would have expected them to have gone in the 2 to 3 minutes since they last spoke. So he turns to his father and tells him, hey, this is weird, look at where they are. But, they figured maybe they either walked pretty fast or maybe they were kind of running. They brushed it off, found some sort of excuse, and they kept going on their hike upwards. So they continue their hike up the mountain when they notice a strange rock arrangement off to the side of the path. It was arranged in a way that kind of reminded Josh of a cemetery where they were spaced out, but there were also single rows of them. So they continue on and they finally get to a point where it's no longer viable for them to continue hiking on their own. They had gotten to a place where the mountain had become too steep and they would now need some serious hiking equipment to keep going. So with this, they decide to call it a day and they start turning back. However, this is where it actually gets very weird. As they turn around to start heading back, Josh turns and he sees a man staring at both him and his father from behind a rock. Now, he was close enough to see what the man was wearing, and what he described was a button-up shirt, some cargo shorts, and a straw hat as well. But he did notice a very odd thing about this man. Considering he was close enough to see what he was wearing, he expected that he would have been able to get a good look at this guy's face. However, he noticed that the guy had no facial features. It was almost as if he were just looking at a clean slate of flesh for a face. He points out the strange man to his father, but as soon as he did that, the guy ducks behind the rock and kind of just peers over the rock, almost as if he's playing a game of hide and seek. And it's at this exact moment that Josh says that he completely zoned out of the experience, and if it weren't for his father being there, he doesn't know what would have happened to him, and he wouldn't have been able to tell what actually did end up happening. So according to his father, Josh started walking towards the strange man, and seeing this happen, his father's wondering, what is he doing? Where is he going? So he starts calling out to him, Josh, where are you going? And by the time Josh was able to, snap back into reality, he comes to his senses, and at this point, he's standing at the edge of a cliff staring down all the way to the ground. So his father is right behind him, and when he snaps back, his father grabs him by the collar, pulls him back to safety, and tells him to stay there, that he was going to go check out who this guy was. However, as soon as his father went to go see who this man was, there was absolutely no trace of him. And the odd part about this entire situation is that there was nowhere for the guy to really go based on their surroundings. It was either he went up the path or down the path, and there was absolutely no sight of this man with no face. Now, when it comes to the disappearances at Mount Shasta, there are so many stories, guys. And it's not just about Mount Shasta. It goes throughout all of the national parks. And the odd part here is that most of these disappearances in national forests are not registered properly. So you kind of have to do some digging to really find out who has disappeared and what the details are of it. Now, one of the more famous cases of disappearances is of the man called J.C. Brown. Now, he claimed to have found a lost underground city underneath Mount Shasta in 1904. And it wasn't until 30 years later when he actually decided to recount the story to a man named John Root. Now, John, completely baffled and also excited about the potential of finding an underground city, he decided to organize an extensive search with the help of J.C. Brown with him as their guide in order to find this underground city. So on the day that they're supposed to start this expedition, there were over 80 people ready to start the search, but J.C. Brown never showed up and he has never been seen since. So was that kind of a case of him just running his mouth and trying to get some attention and freaking out the last minute because he knew he had spread a bunch of lies? Or did something actually happen to JC because he simply knew too much? Then in 1999, a 69-year-old man named Carl Landers actually also disappeared. And he had a very large quest. He actually wanted to climb to the peak of every mountain in the various California counties. And next up on his list was actually Mount Shasta. So his plan, of course, was to climb the 14,000 feet upwards with two of his friends. So on the day he disappeared, he was out camping with his friends. He was feeling restless and he felt like he really wanted to get going. So he decided to get a head start, leaving his two friends at the campsite. Soon after his friends followed, they started their hike upwards, but unfortunately, they just never were able to catch up with Carl. They never found him on the path. So they reported him missing, and since then, he has never been found. There was no clues, nothing of him was ever found. So fast forward a couple years, in 2002, a woman named Angie Marie Fuller actually also disappeared in the woods next to Mount Shasta. They were out, just being mischievous. They were drinking quite a lot that weekend, they both said, and they decided to take the car out to an area known as Twin Pines. Now, like I said, they were both drinking quite a bit, and they ended up getting into an argument. And this was mainly because of the mud that Angela had gotten inside of the truck that day, which upset her boyfriend quite a bit. So they got into an argument, and it was enough for Angela to get out of the car, slam the door, and storm off on her own towards an old logging road. It wasn't until 8 hours later when her boyfriend finally reported her missing, and he said that it took him this long to report her as a missing person because when they had gotten into the argument, he said that he had heard a car door slam shut and drive off. So he figured that she had just gotten a ride with somebody else and completely ignored it so that they could both cool down and go their separate ways. However, when he didn't hear from her, he decided to report her as missing. He was the last person to ever see Angela alive again, and since then, absolutely zero clues were found and there have been no sightings of Angela. More recently, in 2022, actually this past summer, a man named Terry Knight has gone missing, and he was 66 years old. Now, on the day that he went missing, he was said to have gone trail cutting with his mountain bike on Mount Shasta. He was later reported missing the same day, and obviously right away, there was an extensive search done for him. There was extensive searches done on the ground. There was air searches done as well. People, his friends and family looking for him. But there wasn't much luck until a few days later. On June 25th, his mountain bike, his helmet, and some of his clothing were actually found near an area called Mud Creek, which is actually 250 kilometers north of Sacramento, which is quite a distance from where he was last supposedly seen. It's not fully understood or known why Terry would abandon his bike when it's one of, when it could have helped him get back home or to get to safety. And other than that, there were no other clues found. There was no signs of an animal attack. So as of now, the latest update that I could find is that police had not found him yet. But like I said earlier, those are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to strange disappearances at Mount Shasta and especially at other national forests, national parks across the Americas. So what do you guys think is happening at these forests? Do you guys think that there's some unseen force taking people? Do you think people are just succumbing to the elements, getting lost and disoriented? Do you think people are getting attacked by wild animals? Do you think there's something more nefarious going on? Or is there a strange phenomenon that we absolutely don't understand happening out in these forests? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Or if you have any other strange missing 411 stories, let me know in the comments below. I would love to take a look. And if you like these types of videos on national forests and missing 411 topics, leave a comment below and I'll definitely take a look as well. Alright, so that does it for today's video. If you enjoyed this, leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.